The rain started as a gentle patter on the roof, a soothing rhythm to read by. I'd always loved storms, the way the world outside hunkers down, making my little house feel like the safest, warmest sanctuary on earth. By 10 o'clock, however, the gentle patter had become a violent assault. Wind howled through the eaves, and rain lashed against the windows in horizontal sheets. Then, with a flicker and a hum, the lights went out. Plunged into a disorienting darkness, my sanctuary suddenly felt like a cage. The comforting sounds of the storm were now menacing, masking other, smaller noises I couldn't identify. I fumbled for my phone, its flashlight beam cutting a nervous path through the living room. That's when I first heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping on the kitchen window. It wasn't the chaotic drumming of a branch caught in the wind. This was measured, deliberate. Tap, 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 tap. I froze, aiming the phone's light at the window. The beam reflected off the glass, showing me nothing but the swirling chaos of the storm and my own wide-eyed face. I told myself it was just the wind, a strange acoustic trick created by the pressure. The tapping stopped. I tried to calm my racing heart, making my way to the hallway closet to find candles. As my hand closed around a dusty box of them, I heard a new sound, a low, dragging scrape from the back porch. It sounded heavy, like a saturated sack of soil being pulled across the wooden boards. It was followed by a faint metallic rattling, the back doorknob. My blood ran cold. I didn't breathe, didn't move, just listened. The rattling was frantic for a moment, then stopped. Was it an animal? A big one? A raccoon trying to get in? But the deliberate tapping, the attempt at the doorknob, that didn't feel like an animal. I backed away from the closet, my bare feet silent on the cold floorboards. My sanctuary was no longer safe. It had been breached, or at least an attempt had been made. I decided to hide, to wait it out. The small pantry off the kitchen seemed like the best bet. I slipped inside, pulling the door until it was almost shut, leaving only a sliver of a gap to see and hear through. Minutes stretched into an eternity, marked only by the drumming rain and the frantic thumping in my chest. I thought I might have imagined it all, a paranoid fantasy brought on by the storm and the darkness. Then a floorboard creaked, not outside, upstairs. My breath hitched in my throat. I hadn't heard a window break or a door being forced. How? My gaze darted around the dark kitchen, visible through the crack. A small puddle of water was slowly forming on the floor near the base of the stairs. It wasn't from a leak in the roof. Drip, drip, drip. Something wet was standing there, in the dark, just at the edge of my vision. And then it began to ascend the stairs, each step a slow, sodden squelch on the old wood, moving with a patience that was far more terrifying than any frantic rush. It was hunting, and I was trapped in its house. The rain started as a gentle patter against the window pane, a soothing soundtrack to a quiet evening in. I'd always loved storms, the way the world outside surrenders to the noise and the water, forcing a kind of stillness inside. I was curled up on the sofa, a half-read book resting on my chest, the only light coming from a single lamp in the corner, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. The house groaned around me, the familiar symphony of an old structure settling. Then came a different sound. It was a soft, rhythmic tap, 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 tap. It was almost lost in the downpour, but it had a consistency that the random scattering of rain lacked. I sat up, listening. It was coming from the kitchen window, the one that looks out over the overgrown backyard. A branch, I told myself. The old oak tree probably needed a trim. I tried to sink back into the cushions, to find that cozy peace again, but it was gone. The tapping continued, patient and methodical. Annoyed, I got up and walked to the kitchen. I flipped the switch for the back porch light, and a weak yellow glow cut into the churning darkness. The rain was coming down in sheets now, blurring the glass, but I could see the oak tree. Its branches were swaying violently, but none were close enough to touch the window. The tapping stopped. The sudden silence was somehow more unsettling than the noise had been. I stood there for a long moment, my breath fogging the cool glass. As I turned to leave, my bare foot stepped into something wet. I looked down. A small puddle of murky water was spreading across the linoleum, seeping from under the back door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had locked and bolted that door. I checked the bolt. It was still firmly in place. So how was water getting in? And why was it so dirty. It had an oily brown sheen to it, like disturbed soil. A cold draft snaked around my ankles. I traced it back, not to the door, but to the small window above the sink. The one I always kept locked. The latch was broken, not unlocked, but snapped clean in two, the metal jagged and bent outwards, as if forced from the outside. My throat went dry. Someone had been trying to get in. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the dark rectangle of the window. The rain was my only shield, a curtain of noise and distortion. I needed to call someone. I fumbled for my phone on the living room table, my fingers shaking too much to unlock it on the first try. Just as my thumb found the right pattern, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the entire house. For one brilliant, horrifying second, the world outside was as clear as day, and I saw it. Not at the kitchen window, but at the large living room window right beside me. Pressed flat against the glass was a face. It was pale and gaunt, with dark, hollowed-out sockets where eyes should have been. Water and mud streamed down its sunken cheeks, and its mouth was a thin, black line. It wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me into the house, as if taking inventory. The thunder that followed was so violent, the floorboards vibrated. The world plunged back into absolute darkness. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat, a knot of pure terror. I could hear something new now, cutting through the storm, a slow, wet, scraping sound. It was moving along the side of the house, heading for the front. It was still out there, and it was looking for another way in. I used to love the rain. The way it would drum against the window pane was my favorite lullaby, a sound that washed the world clean and made my small, isolated house feel like the safest place on earth. That all changed last Tuesday. The storm that rolled in wasn't just rain. It was a biblical deluge, a solid wall of water that cut me off from everything. The power went out an hour in, plunging me into a world of darkness and the unceasing roar of the downpour. I was in the living room, a book lying forgotten in my lap, just listening. But as the hours crept by, I started to notice something odd, a pattern. Amidst the chaotic symphony of the storm, a rhythmic tapping echoed from the large window overlooking the back garden. Tap, tap, tappity tap. A pause, then again. Tap, tap, tappity tap. It was so faint, so easily mistaken for a random quirk of the weather, a branch brushing against the glass. But we have no trees near the house. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my mind, bored and anxious in the dark, creating order out of chaos. I moved to the kitchen to make a sandwich by candlelight, but I could still hear it. Faintly, but it was there, and it seemed to be following me. Now the tapping was at the small kitchen window above the sink. Tap, tap, tappity tap. My heart began to thud in time with the rhythm. This wasn't in my head. I crept back to the living room and pressed my ear against the cold glass of the main window. The roar of the storm was deafening, but underneath it, I could hear the pattern, clearer now, more insistent. It was like Morse code, a desperate, frantic message from the storm itself. I snatched my phone, its battery draining, and frantically searched for a Morse code translator. SOS? No, that didn't fit. I tried to tap it out with my finger on the screen. The pattern was more complex. It felt less like a signal for help and more like a question. My blood ran cold when I found a potential match. It was an obscure, antiquated rhythm used by miners trapped underground to signal their location to rescuers. It meant, "I know you are in there." A wave of nausea hit me. I backed away from the window, my breath catching in my throat. Who was out there? How could anyone even stand in this tempest? I peered through the glass, but saw only the churning, rain-swept darkness. Then the tapping stopped. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. I stood frozen, straining my ears, listening to nothing but the howl of the wind and the relentless drumming of rain on the roof. And then I heard it again. Not from the window, not from outside. Tap, tap, tappity tap. It was coming from the hallway, from the other side of my locked bedroom door. It was quiet, muffled by the wood, but unmistakable. The same rhythm, the same message. Whatever was out there in the storm wasn't trying to get in. It was already here,